Well, American presidents have tried in the past and failed to bring peace to the Middle East. So does President Trump's plan stand any chance at all? Joining me to discuss that are here in Westminster, Hugh Lovatt from the Middle East and North Africa programme at the European Council of Foreign Relations, and in Tel Aviv, the Chief Executive of the British Israel Communications and Research Centre, BICOM, James Sorene. Mr. Sorene, if I could start with you. Clearly, we just heard from Saeb Erekat, firm rejection of this plan. Doesn't that therefore mean it is dead on arrival?
Well, I think the problem here is that the Palestinians made a catastrophic mistake in December 2017 to boycott the US and sever all diplomatic links. I mean, I understand why they did that. Trump said he was going to move the embassy to Jerusalem and then took steps that were very difficult for the Palestinians. But I think what happened this week is the natural product of them not being in the room. I think they had a lot of options to potentially try and make this deal more favourable in their direction. And I think, it is a very pro-Israel plan. It's very much kind of Israel's suggestions worked up with the US administration. But I think the Palestinians, had meetings this week in Ramallah, and it's clear that they haven't yet sort of fully come to terms with the mistake that they made over the last few years, because they could have pushed for something that was better in their direction. There were options there, and they could have very forcefully put their view across. But I think there's something very interesting going on in Israel now, which we can dwell on, which is that there's going to be a vote shortly where the entire plan is going to be put to the Israeli parliament. And let's not forget, the plan actually calls for a Palestinian state. It calls for Israel ceding significant amounts of land in the West Bank. Now, some people will say, well, that's very harsh on the Palestinians as a final vision. But it does mean the Israeli parliament actually has to have a debate now and say, right, Palestinian state, giving up land in the West Bank, where does everyone stand? And people weren't having that debate before. And I think, Trump has put that on the table. So with all the criticism of the plan, there are things going on.
What do you think?
So firstly, I think we should stop using the term state. What the plan offers is not a state. A state, a sovereign state, is a state that has control over its borders, its territory, its airspace. And we know this because we've had this debate in the UK about Brexit and taking back control. And this plan does not provide that for the Palestinians.
What it does contain is recognition of a Palestinian state, formal recognition by the United States and others, but also plans to connect the two bits of Palestinian territory, Gaza and the West Bank.
So I think we need to, again, be very mindful that there's only one kind of a two-state solution, and we know that because we have these final status parameters that have long framed sort of the zones of convergence for the two sides. And this plan and the Palestinian state, if you call it that, I call it a Palestinian entity, does not meet that. And I think...
I'm just saying what the document proposes. They call it a Palestinian
Yes,
state.
OK, so they do. But they call it a lot of things. They also call it a realistic two-state solution. But we should be mindful that that's not such a thing. And what it's going to give is, it's not going to be a contiguous Palestinian state. It will be a Palestinian state that I don't think Palestinians, of course, for themselves can accept. And so from their perspective, why be basically second-class citizens in what, let's be frank, will be a one-state reality? Why not actually just pivot back and start asking for equal rights?
Why would it be a one-state reality?
Because it's the Israeli government and Israel will continue to have complete military control over the West Bank, and at the same time will be formalizing a dual legal system in which Israeli Jews will have one set of rights as citizens of Israel, and Palestinians will have a different set of rights as an occupied population.
So it's not offering a two-state solution at all. What do you make of that, Mr. Sorene?
Well, I mean, the two-state solution has gone through lots of iterations over many years. It is a state, but it's with the restrictions that have been discussed right the way through from the Oslo Accords. There's huge complexity around the situation on the ground now. I mean, Hugh can dwell on, what the ideal situation would be, but unfortunately we don't have an ideal situation at the moment. The West Bank is run by the Palestinian Authority. It has huge problems with corruption. There is no democracy. You have a leader who's been in power for many, many years. People are crying out to have leadership with legitimacy and with accountability, and they don't have that. You have Hamas, which is a banned terrorist organisation under UK law, which runs the Gaza Strip, and those two entities are effectively in a civil war. So, yeah, it's not an ideal reality, but what the plan tries to do is sort of cut through some of that and set out some proposals. Now, yes, it's true there's a lot of criticism of those proposals, and some of them, defy some inner logic, but it is a starting point for negotiations. And I think what's important is that the Palestinians could come to the table now and say, right, there are things about this that we really don't like, but here are some things we do like, and they should sit down and maybe try and have a negotiation. I mean, Israel is about to go through an election, and that election is now going to debate some of the details of this plan. And Israelis are going to have to actually vote on, do they really want to apply Israeli sovereignty to all those settlements? Do they want this plan or not? And I think, if there is a new Israeli leader after the election, there is an opportunity there.
I mean, Mustafa, isn't there an element of reason in that we are where we are? The Palestinian state, or the two halves of it, are in the position that we are in. And this is at least a basis potentially for negotiation to go forward, and a fresh basis which admittedly accepts a large number of Israeli settlements and all the rest of it.
So I hate to keep coming back to this point, but the question is, what are negotiations supposed to lead to? And I've made my point in terms of not just in terms of how I would see it.
No, but if you take this as the high watermark, then you could start talking rather than just flatly rejecting it.
So I think, these are not just my positions, these are the EU positions. But from the Palestinian perspective, all they have left is rejection, in which they're rejecting. And the question is, if they say no to this, what happens? Like, what happens to Israel? And I think this is a plan that not only does not fulfill Palestinian self-determination in line with the UK's policy positions, UN policy positions, etc., but I fear that actually it also threatens Israel's future, the future of Israel as a democratic and majority Jewish state. What happens in 10 years if Palestinians have said no? Settlement construction continues, then what? Then
that
the Israeli government
for engaging now, mightn't it?
But from the Palestinian perspective, we have equal rights. 20 years, we're not going anywhere. From the Palestinian perspective, let's go for Israeli citizenship.
So you think a one-state solution is now better.
For the Palestinians, I think if we see annexation,
they're not saying that either, are they?
So the young generation is like those who will be in power in 10, 20 years. And even you had Saeb Erekat on, and he's still very much committed to two states, but he has, I think a few months ago, he basically came out and said two states is no longer possible. So I think, this is not about what happens tomorrow or in a week. This is what happens in 10 years or 20 years if we don't have a viable and sustainable solution. And when we see a pivot in the Palestinian strategy and them changing the demands, going away from a two-state solution that was a concession from them to begin with, towards calling for equal rights and a binational state.
OK, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you both very much indeed.